Well, television has an enormous impact. I mean, it was a surprise to me to discover that the television money isn't, the single largest factor in revenues for the major programs. But overall, it is both the source of revenue and the fuel for other revenues that is all important. And the two things most important to point out here, I suspect, are one, the lawsuit filed by the College Football Association that led to a Supreme Court decision in 1984, which took, on antitrust grounds, away from the NC2A the right to negotiate television fees for the entire membership, and gave that right to individual institutions and conferences. The only individual institution that could capitalize on this was Notre Dame, and Notre Dame famously, notoriously signed its own contract with NBC in 1989 or so, to the outrage of everybody else, on the assumption that Notre Dame would now have an advantage over everybody else because their games were always on TV, and within a couple years everybody's games were always on TV. So that advantage was not real. It just sort of opened the floodgates for then the SEC to sign more lucrative contracts and so on. The immediate impact of losing exclusive rights over television by the NC2A was a plummeting of the total rights fees paid to institutions. But then as those came back, they came back entirely to the major conferences and programs, and so that helped tilt the balance between the haves and have-nots. The other thing that's going on simultaneously is that ESPN, which is created in 1979 and goes to 24 hours a day in 1980 or 81, but remains a kind of something like a joke, with tractor pulls and those sorts of sporting events, and until the turning point for ESPN was 1987 when they first got the NFL, and that gave them credibility and so on. But then, so ESPN and plus other cable channels suddenly provide competition with the three major broadcast networks, and a lot more available funding for these games. And so what you have is an enormous proliferation of the number of games, which devalues every individual game, but creates a much larger pool of money, most of which goes to the major conferences.
And everybody wanted an ever bigger piece of that.
Exactly.
It was part of the commercialization that was taking place.
Exactly. And because the major conferences have the main contracts and so on, the lesser conferences are left with the leavings on cable, which means that, okay, we have an open Tuesday night or a Thursday night or Friday night. When I played, football was the easiest sport to play as a student because you missed classes only Fridays before away games, which meant 5 Fridays a year. That was the most. But now, football becomes more like basketball or baseball, where you can miss lots of classes during the week, in order to get on television, before really tiny audiences, compared to, say an NFL game, but still bigger audiences than that college could ever perform in front of. And so, there's lots of implications of this.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.